When I was in college, I got my first car, and it was quite a used car. And I remember on my first trip back from Tampa, I was at USF, going back to Ormond Beach. I was driving there just past Lakeland on the way in a kind of desolate area. And back in 1985, it was even more desolate. And as I was driving along, and I had a pretty full car, I had a blowout. And I remembered that it was kind of a shock. I didn't know exactly what to do, so I kind of veered off, went off to the side of the road, and then got the jack out, had to unpack a lot of the stuff because I was just leaving summer session, and stood on the side of the road and started using the jack, and I kind of got stuck with it, and I didn't know exactly how to use it because I had never really done it before, and I panicked because I wasn't really sure what to do. I couldn't walk to an exit. It was about to storm. So I decided to stand on the side of the road and start waving my arms back and forth like this to see if anybody would stop. A lot of people drove by, I will tell you that, but a nice couple stopped. They were in a yellow Cadillac. Now, mind you, this was 1985, and they were driving by and they had Nebraska plates. And I will never forget, and whenever I drive by that spot, because I'm frequently back and forth on I-4, I always remember them and their kindness, that they truly were good Samaritans. I don't know today if somebody would stop or not. I don't know if they would think, oh no, I don't want to risk maybe something. This could be a crazy person on the side of the road, or what am I getting myself involved with? Those are all the questions that come up in our mind. But perhaps you have been the recipient of a good Samaritan's kind wishes and their kind intent. And that's what Jesus is speaking of today in the gospel. But first we really have to look and say, why did the Lord tell this story? He told this story because the lawyer, probably a young man, questioned and said, what do I need to do to get into heaven? And Jesus tells this story of the Good Samaritan. And really, this is really an opportunity to be able for the Lord to say, I'm giving you a road to holiness, but not just in principle, but I'm giving you something solid that you actually can practice, something that you can do. And so when the lawyer asked, well, tell me, who is my neighbor? Because Jesus spoke about love first, a prayer that really is something that was very sacred to the Hebrew people. It was nothing new to say, what must you do to get into heaven? Well, love your neighbor, yourself, with your whole heart, your whole mind, your whole soul. And if you love like that, well, you'll be able to get there. And the lawyer said, but who is my neighbor? I think what he was really asking is, who is not my neighbor? Who do I not have to help? Who can I avoid? Can I ignore? So Jesus really went on, and he uses this example with these three people walking by the victim. The first one was a priest. And being a priest, I'm going to defend the priest, okay, in a way, because of the fact that he was a man of the law and very strict. And so as a result, as he was walking by the man on the side of the road who was a victim, the victim was probably bloodied. It said that he needed to be bandaged and he had wounds. Well, in the law, and if you were strict to the law, you wouldn't go near anybody who was bleeding because it was considered to be unclean and it would be bad for your soul. So his belief system was such that I'm going to go by because I'm observing what I've given my life to and what I've committed myself to. And as a result, really we have to remember Jesus came for a new law. Jesus came for a new law, and that was that we don't just take the commandments and we don't just take all of these precepts that the Hebrew people had. We have to also now look at them through the eyes of love. And so I don't think that today that would happen. The second man, the Levite, went walking by. I'd like to give him maybe the benefit of the doubt and say, maybe it wasn't that he didn't care. Maybe he just didn't know what to do. Maybe he was distracted. I don't know. It's kind of like the person today that I see a lot of people who are distracted. They have no concept what's going on around them because they're there looking at their cell phone constantly. I saw a video not long ago of somebody walking through a mall And as they were walking through the mall, they ended up falling into a pool, a fountain in the middle of the mall, because they were so busy looking at their cell phone and they tripped into it. I hope a good Samaritan stopped and helped them get out of the pool, of course. But, maybe he was distracted. I don't know. I don't think we can judge right away and say, well, how bad of him. Oh, I wouldn't have done that. We don't know what was going on in his life. Maybe he didn't know what to do. Maybe he wasn't aware, because that's something that is a problem. We're not always aware of people that are right in front of us who are in need. Sometimes we're so distracted, we're like in our own little world, that we kind of go into this zone. It's dangerous. We have to be present to God, present to others. So the third person that comes by, the Samaritan, was the least likely to help, because the Samaritans were rejected. They were considered to be people that you don't mix with, people that you don't really socialize with, that nothing good would come from their land or from their culture. But this is the person that not only helped to bandage the wounds, but then paid for the man to go and to stay in a place, and said, I'll come back and stop by on my way, on my return, to see if you need more money to have cared for this gentleman. So what do we see? But we see an incredible act of kindness. It's really kindness. It goes along with what Jesus said. How do I get into heaven? How do I achieve eternal life? Holiness is achieved through love, through mercy, because even the attorney, the lawyer, said, which one is justified? Which one saw holiness? And he said, the one who showed mercy. And Jesus said, go and do likewise. So love, mercy, and kindness. That gift of being aware of people around us who are in need. And the principle of holiness is something that's very universal. It's with all religions. It should be in all the world. Holiness is something that should be part of our human condition, our desire to be with God. It's universal, but putting it into practice is local. Putting it into practice means that we are aware of the people right around us who are in need. Maybe it's not just the person in our neighborhood. Maybe it's not just the person maybe far away, but it could be the person sitting right at our dinner table night after night. Maybe they need our time. Maybe they need our compassion, our advice, our presence. That is how we exhibit and we give kindness to others. It's just being there with them. When we hear this particular story of the Good Samaritan, it's really an opportunity to think, wow, have I ever been the recipient of someone's kindness? I hope that you have been. Have you ever received someone's kindness? And maybe how are you going to be able to be more kind? How can you be a good Samaritan? It's not always in the big, huge ways, not necessarily in generosity of resources. It's just merely being present. It can merely just be realizing kind of a golden rule. I remember growing up that we were told by my parents, remember 3 things. And this is something that I think is especially important in families, because siblings have an incredible way of being unkind to each other and knowing exactly what buttons to push. And I'm convinced that when we come out of the womb, when we are born, we have an incredible innocence. How is it and where is it that we learn to be unkind? It's kind of like from other people. Sometimes it's in the home. I don't think that's part of our nature to be that way. So I especially appeal to families, to children, to remember a golden rule. It's 3 things. It's very easy to remember. Be kind, be kind, be kind. And charity begins at home. That's where we really learn how to love, in that beautiful incubator of what God has given us with our family. It's with couples as well, between husband and wife, because if husband and wife are sarcastic and nitpicky and nasty with each other, guess what? The children are going to pick up on that, and they're going to think, well, that's just normal. And that's how we go out into the world and how we treat others as well. Kindness. Be kind, be kind, be kind. And not just pick and choose who we're going to be kind to. She says, well, I'll be nice to this one, but I'm not going to be nice to this one. Because guess what? If we are not kind to everyone, inevitably we will be cruel to someone. So just a general rule is to just express it and to try our best. Because I would hope that deep within our soul is that desire to be with God one day. That question that the lawyer asked, that should be a question that we are asking ourselves every day. What must I do today to earn, to get into heaven? What must I do to be holy? And it's not just up in some theological principles that you can only find in a monastery in Tibet, way up high in the Himalayas. No, you can find it in the Scripture to love, to be merciful, and finally, to be kind. And when we exhibit that, when we live it in our life day after day, well, we can only imagine and hope that when we stand before our God, He will look into the whites of our eyes, gently tap us on the shoulder, and whisper in our ears the 7 words we all long one day to hear. Very simply, well done, my good and faithful servant.